So they decide to look on Facebook as anyone would in the modern age if you're looking something.
I mean, yeah, 100%. Like when it comes to organ donation and when it comes to, mass appeals, we've seen the power of social media work in other ways. People now use it for absolutely everything. So Joanne Cullen decided to take to Facebook when she was struggling to find a donor for her husband. And those with experience on the donor lists will know that it takes some time for someone to come forward, and then there's always the possibility they're not a match, and then there's the possibility that they're a match but they're not actually suitable in the end. So she made an appeal on Facebook for people to come forward. I mean, she wasn't putting it out there as if to say please, but she was just making an appeal that if anybody was on the donor list, and if anybody that they were friends with, or anybody that could consider maybe doing this very heroic thing for someone to do, to please come forward and try and help Billy out.
I would never donate a kidney to a stranger, I don't think, while I'm alive. So fair play to Nicola Hutton if she was actually going to do it. But how does she actually establish the contact? How does she come forward?
She comes forward through the Facebook comments on the actual status that Joanne Cullen wrote. So she basically just writes a comment being like, yeah, I would be up for considering doing that for Billy. And then the relationship turns to Facebook Messenger, where they sort of build this rapport up, and basically Nicola tells them that this is something that she wants to do, and she goes in at really full throttle. She talks about how this is something that she's always wanted to do, and she's more than happy to help out. She claimed to be a very spiritual, faithful person, who said that in terms of God, she claimed that her husband was a minister, so therefore that this was something that any kind-hearted Christian would do. And then this led to building a connection and a relationship with the Cullens. They ended up texting, phone calls with each other, and basically, Nicola promised and said that she, for all intents and purposes, was going to give the kidney to Billy.
And just to clarify, there's no money involved?
There's no money involved, no.
And she says she's doing this just out of the kindness of her own heart.
Out of the kindness of her heart, she basically told the Cullens that this is something that she wanted to do for them. She wanted to help them out, and that if she was a match, which I'm sure we'll get onto, which is obviously what she later claimed to be, that she would be more than happy to give Billy Cullen her kidney.
Was she actually married to a minister?
We don't know. I spoke to the Cullens, and they're not sure.
So everything seems normal. Depends how normal you can deem a kidney transplant over Facebook, but everything seems normal. What sort of contact are they having? Is she actually going to doctor's appointments?
Yeah, so a really interesting thing about this, in terms of the Cullens and when it comes to kidney donations, which is that a lot of people will be listening to this probably thinking, well, surely there was some communication here with medical departments. Surely one department should be talking to the other department. It actually really doesn't work like that. So when it comes to organ donation, particularly kidney donation, it's a very separate process. One department in the medical world deals with the person that wants to donate the kidney, and then another completely different department deals with the person who will in the end receive the kidney. So those two departments rarely actually communicate with each other. They see it as a completely separate process. In terms of Nicola's lies, and in terms of the masquerade that she put up, she was claiming that she was going routinely to get tested. So if you're donating a kidney, you obviously have to get tested to see whether or not you're a match with this person, and that does take a lengthy process. My aunt recently got a kidney from my other aunt, so I know that the process is extremely long, and it can be very difficult, and there's people who make it to the very end of the line and they're not a match. So it is a very long process, and Nicola was claiming that she was doing this process every single Thursday. She was attending an unnamed clinic in which medical personnel were testing her, and they were doing checkups with her, and they were trying to make sure that she was going to be a match for Billy and that she was physically fit in order to donate a kidney. And then we know that one day the Cullens received a phone call from Nicola and said that we should meet in person. I have some good news. Let's go for lunch. They went for lunch, and during that lunch, she announced that she had been informed that she was indeed a match with Billy, and therefore would be going ahead with giving him her kidney.
So this goes on for about 6 months?
Yes, so this entire ordeal is around about 6 months, from mid last year until roughly the start of this year. So it was a 6 months ordeal for the Cullens. And it's important to mention as well, it's 6 months wasted. That was time that could have been spent, finding an actual donor. And it goes without saying as well that Billy is progressively becoming more ill throughout this entire process, his kidney function is slowly decreasing. His value of life is slowly decreasing as well. When I spoke to him, he described that, when he eventually had to go off work, his daily life was essentially waking up, having a shower, coming down into his living room and sitting down, and that was him for the rest of the day. But he said that the fact that Nicola's promises and these, this hope that she had given the Cullen family was something that was getting him through that feeling. She was the light at the end of the tunnel, which is that when he had those down moments, he was able to turn around and think, well, at the end of it, this time next year, I'm going to be fully fit and well, and I'm going to have a functioning kidney, and I'm no longer going to have to, go through this disease. That's, really part of the malice in all of this as well. Not only was she giving them false hope when it came to a kidney, but she was robbing 6 months of their life.
And Nicola said at Christmas time last year that there would be a transplant by June.
Yes, she said that she claimed that she was having consultations with doctors and medical staff, and it was all good to go, and she was a match and everything was grand, and that that Billy's life would be saved by this kidney transplant that she was going to go through.
You mentioned the repeated contact over every Thursday, the disappointment.
Yeah.
They're going out for lunch when she says that she is a match. Were there any red flags at all? You've spoken to the Cullens.
Yes. When it came to the red flags, there was a few. So, for example, they said that, Nicola would ring them and she would tell them things like, oh, I'm standing in the rain just waiting on a taxi to one of my hospital appointments here. So it was almost this sort of guilt trip. There was this weird, power play in terms of, oh, well, my taxi's been cancelled, or I can't get a lift to the hospital, but don't worry, I'm doing this all for Billy. This is all for Billy, and, it's worth it in the end. So, she really had this sort of, and they described it like this as well, which is not in these exact words, but it's very much a messiah complex. It's very much, I'm doing all of this for you. One of the red flags was actually pointed out by Billy's wife, Joanne, which is that she picked her up one day to give her a lift. Because she needed a lift somewhere, and you would do that, of course, because this woman is giving your husband a life-saving vital organ, and she noticed that she smelt of cigarette smoke, and Nicola had gotten into the car, and Joanne just said, oh, you're a smoker, I'm surprised that they would allow you to go through this entire process when you're a smoker. But then Joanne did acknowledge the fact that people are smokers, and people, it doesn't mean that necessarily it can affect your kidneys, or I'm sure some medical expert will say that it probably does, but she's not a doctor herself, so she doesn't know. But she did see that as quite strange. Obviously, Nicola came back with saying, well, no, they've tested all this, and regardless of the fact that I'm a smoker, my kidney function is 100%, and this is all, this is all completely fine. So there was little incidents like that where they thought that this was all sort of quite strange. But in terms of an overt red flag, and I'm sure people listening to this will be like, well, did they not do this? Did they not do that? The Cullens are very adamant in terms of, this was a woman that had came into their life. They had no reason to doubt her. The Cullens are a very faithful family. They're very, they attend church. They have a very strong belief in God. Nicola Hutton claimed to share similar beliefs. They had no reason to question why this woman wouldn't be doing this, and that she wouldn't be lying about this, because,
why would
in their defense, who would go to this lengths of lying about something like this? And like we said at the start, for no financial gain, for no other reason than just simply to lie. So no, in terms of obvious red flags, I know we've done a lot of fraud stories, but there wasn't really a moment where they could look and be like, well, why didn't you realize then?